Hello there, guys, and welcome back to Bright Founders Talk from Temi, an international software development company that designs, builds, and delivers software sustainable businesses and promising startups. I was with you yesterday, guys, and I had a little bit of a cold. My cold is still here, so hopefully it will start to be kicking out now because I feel a little bit better, a little bit more energized. So we can definitely speak with our next guest for today, Joshua Titus, the CEO of I'm not actually sure how to pronounce this properly, Joshua. Maybe you can help me out here.
Absolutely. So my name is Joshua Titus, and I'm the CEO and founder of Gozio Health.
Gozio. Okay. So, Joshua, let's start with that. Let's start straight away from the onset. Give us just in a few words, in a few sentences, what is it that you're doing there at Gozio Health?
Fundamentally, what we do is we help people engage with their healthcare systems and take a more active role in the management of their healthcare. And we do that through looking at how we interface to all other aspects of our life via our mobile devices. Whether I wanted to reserve a table right now, right? I could do that. If I want to find the nearest Starbucks, I could do that. If I want to book airplane tickets and have my seat upgraded, and that entire journey fundamentally is happening through a mobile device today. And yet you walk into a hospital system in the US at least, and they're asking you to send a fax with your records on it, right? Like you go back 2 decades somehow. So we're taking the expectations that consumers have in the market in general, and we're basically dragging healthcare into this decade in terms of being able to grab some time on your doctor's calendar to get turn-by-turn directions to the hospital, get you parked, and then a hand-holding experience all the way through the entire journey. And that's both physically hand-holding, in other words, turn left, turn right, as well as sort of a more higher level wayfinding of this is what the journey looks like. You're going to go to this office, and then we're going to wait a week, and then we're going to look at your results and do this. So to handhold people through this experience via their mobile device is really what we're doing, and catching up hospitals that are at least a decade behind in terms of that experience, so that it matches up with what people expect in all other walks of their life. And that's really what we're doing at Gozio Health.
Nice. Okay, Joshua, what I want to do before we get into the world of what you're doing at Gozio Health more detailed, I want to get to know you a little bit better. So I'm going to throw some fast rapid fire questions at you. They're going to be one-word answers or a couple of word answers. Yes, no,
Sure.
Maybe. So team or independently?
For me personally, like how do I approach it? My opinion is that the individual does the revolutionary things, but you need a team to do the evolutionary things. In other words, to grow and be large and successful, you need a team, but breakthroughs are often an individual effort. Sometimes sort of off the grid, do some guy on the corner doing his own thing. So that's my view of it. I think you need both.
So it can't really be one or the other. It is a mixed match of both.
I don't think you can ever really do something revolutionary by committee.
Nice. Okay, cool. Are you a risk taker?
I think people would say yes. I would say no. My risks are all very, very calculated. So in other words, I fly airplanes, I fly aerobatics even, but all those risks are largely under my control. They're calculated risk. I would never do skydiving where if I pull that ripcord, it works or it doesn't, and it's not under my control. So I believe that I am risk averse, despite being in sort of a 9 out of 10 startups fail type environment.
Amazing. What an amazing hobby. Okay. What about work-life balance?
What's that?
Right.
And I think any founders out there listening to this, you know the story, right? They're hard to tell the difference for us. Certainly for employees who have signed on with us and are helping pull this dog sled along, right? Mush. It's very important to keep balance. I think as a founder, where this is sort of your baby, work and life are blended to the extent that I'm not sure you can really separate them. You can certainly set aside time for each, but in general, I think they run together to the degree that at least me, I can't really truly separate them. A Saturday is a Monday, is a Wednesday, is a Sunday, really, largely.
Nice. We will definitely go into that a little bit later. Okay. Are you happy with this year's success?
I really am. We have some real headwinds in the market that we're in. Healthcare got hammered by COVID. All of the, federal funds that were being pumped into hospitals have ended. COVID has not, and that really put our clients in a bind financially. And the way that the team has responded to that, responded to the shift in the market, has gotten back to product market fit quickly as a team. I'm extremely happy with the team. Even though the performance for the year may not be quite where I want it, the team's performance has been phenomenal.
Very nice. Amazing. Okay. The last two questions for you. The strongest skill you have, what is it?
I think my strongest skill is getting other people to adopt and help me solve my problems. In other words, getting people smarter than you, interested in the problem that you're facing, and getting them to jump on board with you. If I look at the people I've surrounded myself with, that to me is sort of the superpower of any founder that has grown a company. It's you've gotten other people involved who are likely in their areas of expertise better than you are.
Amazing. Okay. The last question, your worst mistake that you've made over the last 10 years in Gozio?
This is only an hour show, right? Like we don't have time to go through all my mistakes. My worst mistake, boy, that's a tricky one. I'm picking from the top three here. I would say, if I were to think of it in terms of advice of someone coming along behind me in a similar mode, or advice to my young self, right? I think it was likely being too slow to take things to market, to have the market step in. In other words, we probably, even knowing this is a blind spot for someone who is an engineer at heart, to polish that apple a little too much before you actually take it to market and learn what the market thinks. So even though we followed, the minimum viable product approach, I think we could have gotten it to market sooner and gotten that feedback sooner. So I'd say don't polish quite as much and involve the client or potential client as early as possible in the process. I thought I was doing that. I could have done it quite a bit earlier.
A really nice metaphor. I actually hear this a lot. So a lot of the time people say to me, if you were proud of your MVP, you've taken too long to get to it.
You've been mildly ashamed of it. That's about right. Yeah.
That's what they say. Okay, let's start back from there. Let's go right back to the beginning then. What was the idea 10 years ago for you to start Gozio?
The idea for me is I had come out of technology, Silicon Valley, left lane, working in an industry, designing computer chips, was on the original team for, they did the original Xbox. Nice. So very much down in the hardware, silicon level design, transistor, and that was very successful. However, when I looked at my toolbox, my technical toolbox, I really wanted to take that had been built up over the subsequent years, including getting into working a lot with the design of the chips that go into mobile devices. I really wanted to use that skill set to do something that I thought was solving a little bit more real world problem. Look, bikini beach ball games and first person shooters, they have their place, absolutely, right? But I really wanted to have my legacy be different than that. And so the idea was to take that technical toolbox and find a real world problem that people are facing and seeing if we can crack it. And what I was introduced to through a neighbor and a friend was really the struggles that healthcare was facing in the US, specifically around mobile engagement. And we started thinking, what can we do that would improve that? And one of the first things that we hit upon was the idea of indoor navigation. In other words, GPS. If you think about how GPS just permeates our lives in terms of the apps that really rely on it, Yelp, Google Maps, obviously, Tinder, sort of you name it, there's a location-based element there. And yet we go inside our phones, don't know where they are. So the original problem that I went to solve was, how do I allow a phone to understand where it is, to determine where it is within a building at a high level of accuracy where GPS doesn't work? So put together some technology, filed some patents, which have since been approved, that allow the phone to locate itself indoors with an accuracy of about 4.5 feet. So with that, we sort of have GPS for the indoors. And we thought, Matt, we're done. We've done it. We've cracked this problem. We're going to go and talk to our first hospital client. They'll probably sign a check by Friday, right? That's how we went in, right? Like we got this thing nailed. And we went in and very quickly, like, that is a really cool parlor trick. It's certainly something that we need. But let me tell you what we really need, Josh, right? And so there, again, is the case of not taking this thing to market soon enough. And so we quickly found ourselves with this wayfinding component being a portion of an overall platform, but the larger platform was around digital engagement as a whole. All those disparate data sources that are inside a hospital system, scheduling, availability, wait times, bill pay, checking your lab results, that needed to be put all into one place. And so our platform quickly morphed into something that pulls all these pieces together, creates a really homogeneous experience that includes wayfinding. But now that piece that was the only thing that we did is probably 25% of our overall offering today. So not really a pivot, but I'd say a maturation, right? We matured to understand what the real need in the market was. And the thing that we thought was going to be the end all was really a door opener for us more than anything.
Amazing.
So that was the journey.
Tell me a little bit more about that apple you were polishing. Tell me from the beginning to the end.
So the apple that we bought, and we've done this several times, right? We're slow learners here. But the first one that we did was that MVP around, let's get a mobile app that is focused on wayfinding in front of a client. And by the way, we'll throw in a couple extra things. Like, wouldn't it be cool if you could like order food while you're at the hospital? Let's go ahead and do that integration. And wouldn't it be neat if you could also do this other thing? And what if we also did scheduling? Like, what would that look like? And I can put stuff on so we built out all of these features and functions that we thought would be useful, having no idea how healthcare worked, right? So this is us completely from the outside, solving problems that may or may not exist. And we weren't ready to show it to the client until we got it where we wanted it. Mm-hmm. And of course, we present it. They said, the wayfinding is awesome. This other stuff, have you ever been in healthcare in your life? We're like, no, why? Why would you ask, right? They're like, well, because here's what we really want. And so it was that experience of adding what we thought were necessary additional features that in the end were the wrong features to be adding. In other words, we were sort of putting the window dressings on when we should have just walked in with a pretty rough, as we talked about before, mildly embarrassing version of what we were thinking and gotten that early feedback. That would have saved us probably 3 months of time then. Since then, we've certainly sort of repeated similar things where we think we know what the market wants and we go build this really deluxe version, and it turns out they want a variant of that was a whole lot simpler. So we've learned from those sort of, I would say sophomore errors as well. We had freshman errors. These were more sophomore errors. And since then, we've gotten really good at very quickly taking it to market, maybe even not moving beyond PowerPoint until we have existing clients that have blessed the idea. Josh, I love it, and I would pay for it, especially if you added this tweak, right? So in other words, we're still, almost in PowerPoint, maybe mock-up mode before we get in front of a client now. So we're doing it much, much earlier than we used to do it.
Amazing. Okay, talk to me about this journey from the 10 years that you've been on with Gozio now. How much has the industry and their needs changed from 10 years ago to now?
Yeah, so the need has not changed a ton. What has changed is, whereas before we had to go out and evangelize, hey, healthcare system, you really need to reach out to people and meet them where they are, and where they are is in mobile. That was intuitive to us early on. I will have to say that healthcare didn't necessarily see it that way. Additionally, 10 years ago, you've got to remember that healthcare is quite often led by people who were clinicians in a prior life. In other words, really risk adverse. We say practice medicine, but you don't actually just practice it, right? So you can't get anything wrong. And that was the DNA of the hospital systems. The word innovation was a bad word. Innovation is what you did right before you screwed up and got fired. That was kind of where we went. And this was just shocking to us, being sort of from Silicon Valley, where you innovate or die, right? That's what we sort of came from. So to understand that they saw it very, very differently was something that we had to evangelize and sort of coach around and really look for systems that had sort of moved beyond that. Fortunately, our first client was one of those. So what shifted dramatically is probably at the 5-year mark, halfway through the journey, was that they're like, hey, we have an innovation team set up. Hey, we're going to try 3 things, and we know that 2 of them are going to fail, but one of them is going to work, and we know that. So the ability to fail fast and that mindset and not due just up to our evangelism, it was just the overall industry maturing and younger leaders coming up, and leaders coming up who didn't necessarily come up through the clinical side, although that the clinical side did improve. So the idea of being able to accept some risk and know that you can iterate and get it right, even if it's not right exactly out of the gate. Completely different than clinical, right? When I go to have my knee replaced, you're not going to tweak that for the next 2 or 3 years to get it right. Like, it needs to be right when I leave that afternoon. So it's a different mindset. And then the last part, by about the 10-year mark, whereas opposed, we would have to go in and say, we know that you now are willing to try some things. We know that you want to engage your catchment area, your patients, or your potential patients. We think mobile is the way to do that. And we'd have to evangelize that mobile was the way to reach these people. And that doesn't really happen anymore. When I get a phone call today, it is, Josh, we have a group set up. We have an initiative. We want to engage all of San Antonio via mobile. Can you help us do that? So the need is well understood. The ROI is understood. There's money and committees in place to drive this. And so it's gotten much, much easier to basically supply solutions, as opposed to first, describe the need for the solution and then have to go sell that solution, which was a lot more difficult. So things have gotten easier over the years, I would say.
Absolutely. I like that phrase you said there with Silicon Valley was innovate or die. Definitely in this industry, not so much.
Not so much.
But tell me there, Joshua. So, in your opinion, what are the key reasons that these hospital apps often fail to meet the consumer expectations?
So we found, and this, I would love to claim genius on this, but the truth is we learned this while doing it, is there's this concept of, if you think of like a sort of a Malcolm Gladwell tipping point or a critical mass, if I have 2 or 3 of the things that are going to be a compelling reason to install, but I don't have the 4th, your usage numbers are, and we see this routinely, you'll have 100 users a month, 40 users a month, this type of thing, because you haven't quite reached that critical mass of utility to the end user. If I download something onto my precious device and you're taking up space on this thing that I carry with me day and night, you had better deliver some utility, some real utility to me. And so while they may have had a couple of the key components, they didn't have critical mass. And so what we found is when you have 3, great, and you add that 4th, it's just an incremental add to the value that you're delivering, suddenly it tips. And we see a client go from 40 a month to 40,000 installs a month. So like 4 orders of magnitude greater engagement, 3 or 4 levels of orders of magnitude greater engagement on mobile. And it wasn't that I had to add 4,000 features to make that happen. Now there's a real sort of tipping point that below that is going to be abysmal, and above that you're in pretty good shape. And so we learned where that sort of knee is in the graph, and so we can go into a system and say, you've got A, B, and C. You're great. You're gonna need D, E, and F, and then you're home free. And we can deliver those 3, by the way. So that's what we learned in terms of mobile engagement. So the existing apps failed to deliver real utility to the end user. And that seems completely common sense in retrospect. At the time, though, we weren't quite sure why these apps had such horrible engagement numbers. And so that is what we learned along the journey.
So with this in mind then, Joshua, what are some of the innovating features or kind of technologies that you have used and introduced in order to enhance the user experience now?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. And the answer wasn't obvious to me to start with. We thought there was going to be a killer feature, right? If we can find this killer feature, bam, we've done it. And what I've come to believe is that the killer feature for what is needed with my target audience, with my prospects, my clients, is flexibility. I've built a platform that can very, very quickly allow a client to choose their best-in-class digital solution that plugs into my platform. So in other words, becoming more of a framework that is completely flexible. Flexibility is the killer app for us. In other words, the killer feature for us. So when they want to go buy a new chatbot, and it does this amazing stuff with ChatGPT, but it needs a home and mobile, that I can plug that in without touching a line of code and publish that to 400,000 users the next day. That is the power. So it's being open and being flexible, and that is sort of the killer feature that we've come upon for us. That also allows us to be flexible and future-proof and all those sort of good sort of side benefits. But that is what we now understand as our superpower is being open and being flexible, so you can quickly incorporate new best-in-class point solutions.
Joshua, tell me a little bit more about that, because obviously with the flexibility, there does come quite a lot of more work. You've got to be on the ball pretty much all the time for this flexibility. Yep. How do you tackle that?
Close contact with clients. In other words, we're constantly running roadmaps out to them, getting feedback on what seems valuable and what doesn't. We're setting up pilots with them. Let's go give this a shot. We want to engage staff now. All right, great. You've got 7,000 staff members. We're going to very quickly put together an MVP. You're going to run it out there. We're going to see how it works. We're going to see what you really need to make this super valuable. We do that very, very quickly in a matter of months. And then we take that solution once we've actually tried it in the field, and we roll that out to our other clients, as well as pitching it to our prospects. So that constant, innovation that we do, client in hand, right? We really lock arms with them so that we don't go off and do something that we think is slick and no one else cares about. So that is how we sort of stay ahead. And while healthcare systems will tell you, and this is sort of unique to healthcare, that, hey, we are unique. We're like no other system in the world. There's a little bit of truth to that, but honestly, often what we find is they're different flavors of the same problems, right? They're not actually different problems. Everyone needs to check their bill. Everyone needs to book time on their doctor's calendar. Everyone needs to look at lab results, right? These are common needs, and they're often solved using common methods. And so really what seems like an extremely daunting task to sort of make these things sort of connect and plug in to begin with, the truth is, when you do the top 5 of these point solutions, you've addressed 90% of the market need, right? It's that type of thing. So we've constant innovation with arm in arm with clients is how we've avoided, sort of missing what the next piece of flexibility that is needed is. So working with clients, quite honestly, is the answer.
So you're obviously saying that the needs of the clients pretty much are the same regardless. Always, people need to see pay their bills. People need to see their lab results.
Yeah.
What year did you experience your biggest engagement? Did people start to really take health more seriously after COVID? Was this kind of a spike in the understanding of people needing to look after themselves and they needing technological help for that? When did you see the engagement grow?
So for us as a company, we grew very, very rapidly in 2019. So when COVID hits in 2020, it underscored for any of the folks that were on the fence that you have to be able to engage your catchment area via digital. I received, and it was, third week of March, just as this thing was hitting the US, calls from several of my top clients. Josh, we're about to shut this hospital down. No patients or visitors are going to be able to show up unless you test for this particular thing. And I have no way to communicate that to my catchment area. Like grandpa and grandma are showing up and we're turning them away. We're only accepting the patient and a patient who tests positive for A, B, and C, right? And I have no way to communicate. I have no way to do this and that. The things that a mobile interface bring you, it just underscored the need for that. So anybody who was on the fence got knocked off the fence by COVID. And so as we're coming out of COVID now, we no longer have to say, hey, you should probably have a digital strategy here. No, the question is, as I mentioned earlier, Josh, we need a digital strategy. We need to engage via mobile. How do we do it? How do we catch up quickly? So COVID really underscored a need that that the market had begun to realize in 2019.
Joshua, I want to go back to a few things that you said at the beginning of the interview. So a little bit more on a personal note. You said about you flying planes and also air acrobatics, I think you said this way, as you named them. Tell me a little bit more about that, and what has this experience taught you that helps you to be a better founder, CEO, leader?
Interesting. Yeah, I don't know if I've connected those two things. I guess I got into aerobatics because I didn't want to die in an airplane. Well, I love flying, but I don't want to. I don't want to die in an airplane. And so I apprenticed myself to a woman she was out in Silicon Valley named Amelia Reed, who taught most of the air show pilots on the West Coast how to fly aerobatics. And I went to her and I gave her my full credentials and I said, will you teach me how to fly aerobatics? And she says, no. And go away. And so I come back to her and I basically, plead my case. And finally she took me on and I flew with her and her instructors and learned to fly aerobatics out on the West Coast and absolutely loved it. So how does that help me? I think it was challenging. It was one where, and I'll tell you, Matt, this is actually the truth of it. As engineers, we typically make pretty bad student pilots. We like to solve problems in our own sweet time. We want to have a cup of coffee, scratch our chins, think about the most optimal solution before we pull the trigger on it, right? And even then, we're going to test it 5 different ways to make sure it is indeed optimal. That is not how doing something in the real world live works. If I sit down and scratch my chin and think about what I should do with a plane, I'm 3 miles ahead before I figure that out. And now that is no longer the right solution. So the idea of doing something that is good now, not great, doing something that is good now is often better than doing something great later. In other words, an 80% solution today is better than 100% a month from now. That is what really taught me of having to make decent decisions now. And I think when they've done studies of successful leaders, one of the things they found is that a successful leader doesn't necessarily make more right decisions than one who isn't successful. So it's not necessarily the quality of your decisions. That plays into it, of course, but it's more that you make the decision. We're going to do this. Let's go. This is good enough. Take it to market. So you're making decisions as opposed to, the paralysis of analysis. Let's think about this a little more. Let's think about why we shouldn't do this. And is this absolutely perfect before we take it there? So I think aerobatics and having to do something smart now, just you can't do something dumb, but you don't have to do the most brilliant thing every single time. That was a lesson that was drilled into me with a slap of a leather glove on the back of my head during my training. So I remember those lessons well, and I have endearing memories of a million.
Joshua, I definitely think that is one of my favorite answers that I've actually heard on this show in regards to how kind of a hobby can actually help be a better leader and a better CEO, founder of any kind of business. I have another question for you, because we were speaking at the beginning about work-life balance. What's that? With regards to this, obviously you've been going 10 years now at Gozio. That's I don't know if that would even be classed as a kind of a startup anymore. I don't know when the kind of threshold it closes for that. I don't think anyone's given a kind of definition of when we stop calling it a startup. How do you cope with this ability to not to engage both parts, not have a separate work-life balance, and not burn out?
I think it is, I have two co-founders, and I think it is just really open communication throughout my executive team when you need that time out, right? Like, hey guys, I'm feeling burnt today. I got to disappear for a little bit. I'll be back on Wednesday, and I just need to go recharge the batteries, and that's okay. There's no one's going to look down on you for that, or that's some weak sauce you're bringing today, Josh. You should work Monday, work through the weekend. No, to be respectful for and to know your own limits, know what burnout looks like, and a lot of that is just things that we learned coming up through, as my three founders did. In Silicon Valley, you saw a lot of burnout. You saw guys just completely implode. Knowing what the signs of that are, having done it myself, right, previously, so that when you get to that edge and you know that you really need to recharge those batteries, you can raise your hand and go, all right, I'm tapping out for a little bit, guys. I'll be back. And to be cool with that. And that really goes for everyone in the company who's under high stress. If you need to tap out, no shame in that at all. See you when you get back. And we have for instance, we have a limited vacation policy at Gozio. And the idea being that you know what you need to charge your battery. And as long as it's somewhat reasonable, we're happy to support that. Nice. So I'd say knowing your limits.
Mm-hmm. I was going to ask that then, because I was thinking as you were answering that, does that only apply to people of higher kind of status, higher level, that they get to take output?
Anybody who has a stressful job. And we have installers who are in hospitals at 3 a.m. drilling into reinforced concrete over their head in the cold and rain, right? These guys are going to get burned out too. And so when they come back, like, I need some downtime. I'm tired of being on the road. You got to respect that. And what I found is there's no penalty for doing that. There really isn't. So sure, they missed 3 days while they recoup, but when they come back, they're energized, they're stoked.
They want to come back.
Your attrition is almost zero. They want to come back. They know that you've got their back. And it's like one of those studies they did where they allow you to administer your own pain medication, right? They give you the red button to press. Turns out people use like 25 or 30% less pain medication when I know that button is mine to control. When I need that time off, when I'm feeling burned out, it's available to me. You actually have more gas in the tank. And so that we've seen that to be true too. So we've seen no penalty at all from just being upfront around where you are in terms of work-life balance. And I do think it's important, by the way. I don't need to minimize it. I just, as a founder, I think that work and life do blend to the point that they're almost indistinguishable.
Okay, one more question for you here. So 10 years for Gozio it's been going, just a little bit over now, I believe. What is the secret to make a startup continue for 10 years?
Don't sell early. No, how do you make a successful startup? And again, we're high growth mode. We're sort of out of that infant mortality that a startup that causes you to wake up in the morning with your chest clutched. Those days are well behind us now. So we're high growth. The worst case for us is still a pretty good case. But through those startup years, how do you keep it going? I have found for me personally and for my co-founders, and it started out true for my employees, but has become absolutely a cornerstone over the past few years, is to believe in what you're doing. Do something that actually matters. Do something that you want to be remembered by, right? When you're gone, do something that you want people to reflect on and remember you by. Leave a legacy. And I think COVID helped really underscore that for people who maybe hadn't really thought much about it before. So while we were hiring and building out our engineering team, we more than doubled our employees last year. We thought it may be hard to hire. And it turned out, because of the mission that we had, folks said, look, I want to do something with my life that I actually am proud of. I want to work on something that matters. And I think COVID really gave people that pause and think about what they're doing. And we found that to be a great advantage for us. So I'd say one of the things that will help you long-term and also help you attract and retain talent is to pick something that you yourself are proud of having attempted, and something that will make the world a better place. And if you do those things, I think you'll have no shortage of people who want to jump on with you and stay with you. And that's been true for Gozio. So I'm really fortunate that we chose a mission that resonates with so many people.
Amazing. Joshua, thank you so much for coming on Bright Founders Talk. It's been amazing to pick your brain, and I might have to in the future take up air acrobatics as well. Sounds like
Absolutely. I'll send you some links. Yeah, no worries at all. Cool. Matt, very nice to talk to you today. I appreciate the time.